We have Guy Tawney from Lanvale and Era, both a SI partner and a app on the App Exchange for Salesforce licensing. Welcome to the podcast, Guy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Awesome. And funny story for those listening, Guy's actually on a boat. And thank you, Guy, for taking the time. I'm getting prepping for the boat race this weekend. It's I'm actually jealous, like I mentioned, but even though you have things going on this weekend, thanks for taking the time out. I'm prepping for the weekend and with your boat race or sailboat race.
Yeah, for sure. No, I apologize. I should be at home in front of my computer right now. I got a little bit hung up, and but here we are, and yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, you're a busy guy. You got a consultancy, you have an app, yeah, sailboat racing. It's awesome. So I guess just to get people to know you a little better, and know you a little more, to kind of go back a little bit. I know you launched your agency and you have Era, the app. What did you do before you got into the Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, other than being a seventh grade math teacher for a quick moment in time, most of my career prior to starting Landvale was actually in real estate, and so it was a real commercial real estate broker for a number of years, and it was in commercial real estate that I was first introduced to Salesforce and had a number of kind of responsibilities as a junior guy on a team, setting up some Salesforce instances for clients and fell in love with it there. Kind of just loved the process and everything about it. And so when I was leaving real estate, was kind of jumped on the Salesforce wagon full time with launching Landvale.
And was that like a job you got, or you used it at that company, or because then I assume you transitioned into launching your own thing, your own consultancy with Landvale. Kind of what were the moments in there that inspired you or got you motivated? Or are you an entrepreneur at heart? How did all that come about?
Yeah, for sure. So first got my hands into Salesforce as a part of a larger kind of contract we were working on in which we promised somebody an instance of Salesforce to help manage their real estate portfolio. And so at that time, being one of the younger folks on the team, a lot of the setup for that just sort of trickled down onto me and loved that process. And then from there, my responsibilities in Salesforce sort of just grew and grew. And I sort of was getting pulled into more and more internal Salesforce projects because I seemed to have a knack for it. Took another position where Salesforce was playing a bigger part in my kind of job description, and then ended up leaving or getting laid off actually from that company. So it's with a private real estate private equity company for a little while. Got laid off from there, and that was when I launched Landvale, and it was at that time. So it's 2018. I had just gotten married, and I knew that kids were on the horizon, but always wanted to start a company. And so kind of realized it was my hand had been forced in a great way. I was kind of now or never, not now or never, but it was kind of, a lot easier to do it pre-kids than post-kids. And so sort of just took the opportunity and ran with it and launched Landvale.
Running a Salesforce consultancy is hard. Being an SI is hard, like with the amount of competition, especially when you're like starting from scratch. It takes a lot of effort, hard work to get to a certain point. And not just that, but then you also decided to like launch an app, Era, like ISV. So like consultancy versus SaaS, like implementation versus product. And someone like myself who's been in like consultancy, like consulting career the whole life, I'll admit there'll be a few instances where I recruited for like the product companies and I was shut down. You don't speak a language, you know nothing about product. So you're a consultant. So like, don't waste your time, don't waste our time. So like two different worlds. People from outside, they almost look at everything as like one single piece, but like just completely two different animals. You took on both. So just talk us through, tell us more a little bit of like, if one challenge wasn't enough, you took on another challenge at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit of a glutton for punishment, maybe. I think I what the reason for that I think is like I love just learning new things. Yeah, it's just really scratch that itch starting any business. You're forced to get your hands into all sorts of corners of your company that you would never have an opportunity to see or learn about otherwise. And I think that a big part of the desire, personal desire to also start a SaaS company is just that kind of extrapolated out. It's like, oh gosh, here's something else to go and learn and do and experience. So much of what I love about running Landvale is the opportunity to um, context switch for better or worse constantly, and spend one moment talking to developers about how we're architecting a massive automation, and then the next moment working with the marketing consultant on developing content and images for the website or a presentation, and so it's kind of like another opportunity to um yeah just dive into something really interesting and learn about it. And then I'd be remiss to not mention the role that the opportunity of Era. Yeah, I think we've built something that is going to be really significant and make a really big difference. And so having a product that I'm excited about, no doubt, is playing a role.
Yeah, because I think what you're looking to solve and what you provide with Era is an issue that is virtually across the board in Salesforce instances, right? Especially the larger implementations, the mid-size and below, which is licensing. So I guess, can you walk us through what Era does, what problems it solves, the value it brings, and to even go into even where that came about, like where the light bulb came out, where you saw the opportunity, but even just background on Era and what it does.
Yeah, for sure. So Era is a license auditing tool that's native to Salesforce. What it does is a pretty extensive and complicated analysis of what data do your users access, what licenses do you have in place today, how much are you paying for those licenses, what licenses are assigned, what features are being used, what features are not being used, to be able to give you a summary of your license reality in Salesforce, or totally native to Salesforce, as well as make recommendations on ways to unload shelfware. So I'll use that word a bunch today, probably. So shelfware, just take a second to kind of define what I think that means is software that you're paying for, you're buying, and you're just sticking on the shelf, as compared to software that you're actually fully utilizing. So whether it's licenses that you're paying for and simply aren't assigned, or licenses that are more feature rich than your users actually need and more expensive.
Never happens. Never happens in Salesforce, right? I would say that's like 90 plus percent, right? I mean, literally, it's a chronic challenge and it for customers that own Salesforce.
It is. And it's amazing that this doesn't exist. If you look at Microsoft and AWS and most other platforms that you might consider peers for different products on Salesforce, they have something far closer to this. And then, on top of that, when you talk to people about Salesforce, there's usually two primary gripes. One is that it's complicated. It's a little bit hard to navigate. Usually, I don't really blame Salesforce as a product. Usually, it's a product of, that challenge is a product of the implementation. And then the other point everybody brings up is that it's expensive, right? It's almost universal. It's hard for me to meet somebody and tell them what I do for a job and them not mention that they think Salesforce is expensive. And the reality is that once you look at what features your users are actually utilizing and what license you're actually utilizing, the opportunity to cut costs is incredible. And I think once people are using Era and kind of right sizing their license structures and implementing license strategies based on these insights, I think that second one's going to go away.
And out of curiosity, how do you divide your workforce between these two? On the consulting side, ISV, do you have a heavy overlap where you're optimizing for resources, or do you have like dedicated teams focused on consulting and the ISV side?
Yeah, for sure. Good questions. It's important to mention that a long time ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we pivoted from providing consulting services to exclusively focusing on development work. So, what I mean by that is our team stopped doing business analysis, change management, and data projects, configuration changes, training type of work. We've decided to focus exclusively on Apex, big complicated flows, custom UIs, custom integrations, types of projects. And so most of the team at Landvale has been made up of developers and QA personnel. And the overlap between Landvale and Era has been fantastic, because early on, Era was sort of a side project that we were building as because we thought it was valuable, but also because we have incredibly talented developers and QA folks on the team who aren't always assigned to a billable project. And so as when they had a little bit of extra time, or they weren't working on client projects, we were working on building Era. And so there's a really healthy sort of overlap that exists on the people that are working on client projects through Landale and Era, and people kind of having an opportunity to move back and forth.
And so that's really interesting. I mean, there's so many areas we can go into, but I guess Avinash and I have had many, many Salesforce partners on here, and we talk about niching and like an ideal client and industry focus. But it sounds like you've carved out a niche, I think, and I'll see what you feel about it, where you only are doing development. You got away from configuration, business analyst, all the upfront stuff, on that side of things, and focus on development. Do you consider that kind of what you define as your niche? Like, hey, we're only doing development. And was there some reasoning behind that or some thought? I'm assuming there was, but that's a unique niche I haven't heard in a while, at least from the folks Avinash and I have talked to on the podcast.
Totally, yeah. Part of it was just organic. It was sort of led by client needs. We had started out with a client who we did the most basic implementation for, and they're still a client today, and they demanded more and more technical resources every single time we turned around. And so we sort of were forced a little bit in a good way, and really happy it happened. Get more technical while this kind of our largest client for a number of years, sort of absorbed some of the business analysis and change management, creating fields, changing page layouts, creating reports, types of pieces of the puzzle. So that was kind of one key piece. We were sort of didn't have an option. To keep up with our clients, we had to kind of go this direction. The other piece of it is that I think it's very difficult to find good Salesforce consultants. I think that I always tell people I'm bad at most things, but for some reason I'm good at this one little thing, which is Salesforce consulting or whatever. For whatever reason, like that just kind of aligns with the way my brain works. I don't think that means I'm special. I just think that's just kind of the way it puzzled out. And I I think it's really hard I just don't think there's that many people in the world that are good at Salesforce consulting, frankly. And I think if you talk to people about their experience with Salesforce consultants, you hear that. And so as a business owner focused on building a Salesforce consulting company, I said, hey, all right, if the supply of talent in this space is really limited, where can I grow in this space that I love and this product that I've kind of become obsessed with, and saw a path with development where I think it's easier to find good development talent than it is to find good consulting talent.
So since you've been heavily focused on the epics classes, like just hardcore coding, and like anything project management, BA, change management, you just like almost like secured yourself from those functions. Curious to know, like, have you guys found any tools of late that's improving code quality? Because we hear stories where people are now using Cursor to like fast track Salesforce coding implementation. Just curious to know, like, if there are any AI tools or maybe like just modern day products that you guys have come across that helped that made the developers' life better.
Totally, yeah. We use Cursor nonstop. It's incredible. It's really interesting though. There's a couple tools I should mention that we use. We love GearSet. That was a game changer when we first implemented it for us internally. And then Cursor more recently. And on the projects or the requirements that AI is helpful for, where it's like really helpful, it's incredibly helpful, right? Like this is a type of project that lends itself to pulling AI in. It can be like just night and day for some of these things. The efficiencies we're getting from Cursor. What's really interesting though is a little while ago, just a couple weeks ago, we kind of like stopped and we looked at all of the work we had in progress and said, hey, how many, of all the cards that we're working on across all of our clients, across Era and everything else, what percentage of them um, are being aided by AI? And for us, it was about a third. And then so 2/3 of our cards, there just wasn't really much of a role for AI. It was for whatever reason that particular deliverable. Just you ask a question here or there, but you weren't getting much value from AI. The third that of cards that we have in process at that moment that we're getting real value from AI on, maybe half of them were like a lot of value, but that half, it was like night and day, right? So half of a third of six of the deliverables that we were working on are being expedited exponentially because of Cursor's doing this massive analysis of a huge code base and giving us a summary, or auditing a whole bunch of different files to say, hey, in this transaction, here are the places you might be able to restructure it to decrease the number of Socko queries. And it's, when we come across things like that, it's like just a total game changer.
And is there a average ramp up time for a Salesforce developer to learn Cursor and more importantly, learn how to use Cursor the right way on a Salesforce implementation?
It's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that. I don't think I know. And use it the right way. I mean, there's like, there's degrees of success with it, right? And you can get value. You can log in there tomorrow and start getting value from it. I think everybody's used enough to interfacing with ChatGPT that switching to cursors is going to be intuitive. There's a little bit of a learning curve in terms of like just getting your arms around what is the context that cursor has access to, what is the data, what is the code that, and how does it have what it needs to give you an answer, and then when it gives you an answer, just like everybody talks about all the time, applying your lens as the expert to that response. I don't know if there's really much ramp up time, and maybe that's why Cursor is worth a gazillion dollars overnight.
Yep. And to take a step back again into licensing. So I think you definitely hit a spot in the market in the Salesforce ecosystem, the client base. Everyone knows there's a challenge. So in terms of the conversation, because I know there's different aspects, right? You have Salesforce at play, you have consultants, you have the clients, right? It's always a three-way thing that we always talk about, and ISVs. And I see that you saw the opportunity with Era to do the license audit to verify and help clients understand what licenses are really needed and being used and not. So I guess your perspective on, right, it's been like 20 years, 25 years, whatever the Salesforce length of time has been around. What's been missing from your perspective in that license conversation? And was it just accepted by everybody? Does Salesforce know something that we all don't? What's your just general thoughts on the whole licensing discussion and everything around that in the ecosystem? Because I'm assuming that's why you created Era, from what you mentioned.
For sure, yeah. Great question.
A lot of questions in there.
Yeah, I'm trying to, it's nice. I got to pick which one I'm going to answer, whichever one I can remember. So yeah, I think like, the reality that I see around licensing in Salesforce today is that there is so much complexity that exists as a barrier to companies being able to have transparency into what licenses, what their licensing reality is. To being able to say, hey, in one view, here are all of your licenses, all the costs of all those licenses, all the licenses that are being used and not used, and which users don't need access to the features that you're paying for or don't need access to Salesforce at all. And I guess like when I think about the state of Salesforce around licensing, I just think it's extremely opaque. It's not just pretty complicated in the setup menu. It's also pretty complicated in the endless technical docs that you have to review to sort of interpret this stuff. And it's pretty complicated as you kind of try to navigate the pricing pages on Salesforce's website. And so, yeah, for sure. I don't know, maybe that answers one of your questions. I think that it's, the reality of Salesforce today is it's opaque, and how it got there. I don't think I'm qualified to say. There's a little bit of a dynamic with Salesforce where you do kind of see people just buy it because it's what you buy, right? It's sort of like the IBM of CRM, and so maybe that plays a role. But I'd be speculating for sure. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that piece of the question.
So the Salesforce licensing has obviously evolved. And I think over the past 6 to 12 months, it's changed a lot. And it's changing even more with the whole consumption based pricing. Agent force pricing has changed, data cloud pricing. So we're in this phase where Salesforce itself is like figuring it out. So I don't think when was the last time where we had experienced so many changes to the licensing model over the past 6 to 9 months. Curious to know, how has this impacted your product? Like, did you guys have to like pivot multiple times, or are you like secured and sealed from everything that's happening internal to Salesforce?
Yeah, cool. Good question. So, there's a couple of pieces to dive into there. First of all, as it stands today, is only auditing and analyzing your human user licenses. And, we're paying a lot of attention to what Salesforce is doing with their tooling around managing the consumption pricing and credits in Agentforce, and looking for kind of gaps that we might be able to help fill there, because that's totally complementary. And I think it's going to play a really important role in the success of Agentforce, is giving people the confidence that they're not going to blow up their credits, and just an easy interface for managing that consumption. So paying a lot of attention to that to see how we can be helpful. But as of today, our product is solely looking at human user licenses. I think the thing that makes Era most exciting right now, though, is that in the context of Agentforce and in the context of this kind of more complicated, ever-changing pricing structure that we're seeing happening, is that it creates an opportunity for people to reallocate resources from human licenses to agent licenses. And a lot of people, and I think John, you sort of alluded to it earlier. What about what's Salesforce? Everybody asks, is Salesforce okay with what you're doing? Is this are you gonna get in trouble, or is this and and I kind of laugh, and you know I honestly think that in the long run, Era is a good thing for Salesforce on a couple of fronts. One is that, if at its core, if we're adding value for Salesforce's users, for Salesforce's customers, it's going to be good for Salesforce long term, whether that's because they're simply retaining those customers, or because maybe it's an opportunity for Salesforce to work with those customers to reallocate spend from human licenses to agent licenses. And I'm certain that there's going to be some people that don't see that don't value that don't get it. But I challenge them and say, hey, if you're an account executive at Salesforce, how much are you getting paid for your Agentforce revenue, and how much are you getting paid for your Sales Cloud or Service Cloud revenue? And I think this could be a tool that even helps those folks.
Yeah, and even I don't know if that's the best way to put it, and not to say anything about Salesforce, this or that, but it's also just the right thing to do, right? If a client has licenses that they're not doing, it should just be a good, right thing to do to say, hey, you don't really need all these. Let's convert it, or let's save some money, or during renewal we'll figure it out. But it just seems like a logical, right thing to do that benefits all parties, like you mentioned.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And how does a customer get started? Like, do they do they typically go through like pricing tiers? Do they get some trial? Just walk us through a little bit about your pricing model.
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty simple. It's $9 per user per month. Is how it's structured at the moment. We're looking at sort of switching that up and getting a little bit more creative in terms of offering tiers, and considering perhaps an initial startup fee, sort of for a set of features, and then a per user cost in addition to that. But absolutely, you can go install Era today from the App Exchange, and as a trial, and you'll have access to some of the really basic components that we've been talking about. It'll give you an example of how the audit works. It'll show you all of your details about your Salesforce license, your core Salesforce license, but it'll kind of stop there in the trial. So enough to sort of see how it works, see that it works, and then from there it's pretty simple, per user per month pricing.
And I'm assuming, right, it's a consultant or an admin. It's, even though it's per user, it's installed by the admin or a consultant. And then does it run over time? Is it a one-time thing? I guess, can you go into a little more on how it works? Let's say you install it day one. Does it take 3 months to understand truly who's using what? Or is it a one-time, 1 day, 1 hour thing? Or can you kind of go through how that works end to end to really get to the output and the results?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a great question, and it's one that everybody asks about. And it's kind of like, people think about a license audit, and historically, a license audit has been this big singular undertaking that takes a bunch of man hours to generate, and then you kind of get the results and you act on it, and you're done, and the audit is stale almost immediately, like a lot of kind of snapshots. So there's a couple of pieces in here that's a little bit different, and why it works as a SaaS solution. One is you do need to have it installed and running for a period of time to gain a high degree of confidence over user data access. So I think I mentioned before that one of the key criteria for determining what licenses a user is eligible for is seeing which objects they're accessing. If they only live on accounts, contacts, custom objects, reports and dashboards, notes, and things like that, they have a lot of options. But if they're using cases and leads and opportunities, they probably have to stay on their Salesforce license. And so we have what's essentially a listener, if you're familiar with kind of medical record systems, that's a part of the solution that's observing what data each user is accessing and actually how long they're spending on those records. You need that to run for a period of time in order to have a high degree of confidence that, okay, yeah, this user never accesses opportunities, leads, cases, this sort of protected list. And they're eligible. And so, the longer the better on that front. We usually recommend about a quarter. Era installed and running, observing that. And so when you think about the timeline of realizing value from Era, from the day you install it, you need to have it running for a period of time to observe user data access. And you want to have that completed prior to going into your negotiations, your renewal negotiations with Salesforce. So you know what you're going to be renewing. There's certain pieces of it where it's a click of the button and Era runs and examines your metadata to sort of surface a whole bunch of really valuable summary information of your licenses or detailed information of your licenses. And that audit is something that you can run it once and get a lot of value from, but you can also run it as frequently as you like because there's no cost to executing that audit. So you might have a change occur in your organization and having, which would completely change your licensing reality. And previously, you might have had to expend hundreds of human man hours to try and get a little bit of an understanding of what your new reality is. But because it exists as a SaaS in your org, you just click a button and you kind of have an updated look at your licenses. So a little bit. The timing thing is a really interesting because when do you realize the value from Era? It's on your contract renewal. And so, the lead up and planning for your renewal when you're thinking about implementing Era is critical. And you need to leave time both for the Era to run and accumulate that user data access information. But that needs to be done prior to your negotiations with Salesforce. And you need to have time prior to that renewal to move those users from Salesforce licenses to platform or from partner to community, because on the day of your renewal, those more expensive licenses are no longer going to be available. So that transition needs to happen in advance. And one of the things that's been really fun is that we've been able to become sort of a thought leader in that space. It's an area that not a lot of people are executing strategies on. And so it's been really, really cool to kind of collaborate with customers on that side and get to scratch my consulting itch a little bit and help sort of people figure out how to do not just what is the license strategy, but how to execute on it and how to test once those licenses have been updated to make sure, or before those licenses have been updated to make sure that they're not going to cause disruption.
So we have a quick update. So there was a change in Era's pricing model. There's a lot of thoughts around this, which we'll get into in this next few minutes. We have Guy back again. I know that the original model you guys had was a little bit different, but you have a new model now. So I guess the pricing model and how it works for clients that install and use Era, can you talk through that and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. No, thanks for having me back and for kind of doing this to give us a second chance to share what's evolved. I'm really excited about this. It's basically we switched from the traditional per user per month pricing that everyone sees on most software that's out there. And that's kind of what we had been offering previously, to a kind of pay for success structure where we only get paid. Era only collects a fee if the customer saves money. And the way we do that is we charge a 20% of savings actually realized to the customer after they've already renewed their contracts. Kind of do 14 days, do 30 days after the contract renewal. Basically what we do is we take some benchmarking numbers a month prior to the renewal to say, hey, this is where you were before renewing the contract, and then take a look at what the total spend is after the renewal and charge a 20% fee of that.
Awesome. And I know we chatted about it a little bit. So in terms of the months and time that people would need to run Era, right? They're coming up to renewal. I know we touched on this a little bit for previously, but just to kind of catch people up again, I know it's typically when you're coming up for renewal. So if people have a 3-year contract and they just started, it might be better to use Era maybe in 2 years, but where's that sweet point where people would be most likely to see the value of Era and use it to really let Era run to verify and validate the licenses, who uses it, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a super important part of this. It's kind of developing the license strategy that Era helps with is sort of the first step to actually realizing value. If you think about all the things that need to happen prior to renewing your contract, you need to have the users actually moved over onto those new licenses. You need to have negotiated your renewal. You need to test those license changes. We've identified, said, hey, based on everything that's possible to observe in Salesforce, these are the users who are eligible to be downgraded from one license to another. But of course, you got to test that and make sure that there's not a third party's downstream application, which could, we're not able to see, that could be causing trouble. And before that, you got to figure out what is your license strategy, right? So you got to actually have Era installed, recording your user data access for a meaningful period of time to be able to say, hey, these are the users that are not utilizing these licenses. And these are the users who are on more expensive licenses than they have to be. And that period of time there's fluctuate. I'd like to see 3 months of that at least, but we've done it with less. And basically it's the longer it's installed, higher degree of certainty you can have that the decisions that you're making based on the results of the audit are going to hold up. If you only had Era installed and recording user data access or recording user feature access for a couple of weeks or a month, you really wouldn't have enough certainty to make the decisions that
people could be on vacation, right? Right. Or different times a year they use Salesforce. I'm assuming that's kind of a factor, right? Like you need a decent length of time to really validate it based on times a year, et cetera.
Maybe there's somebody who only accesses or uses a part of Salesforce once a quarter, and they're only doing it once a quarter, but that one time is really valuable and it's totally worth it for them to be on that more expensive license or have that license at all because of that quarterly access. If it's only installed and observing user behavior for a short period of time, you might miss that.
Yep, for sure. So there's two other aspects I was hoping to pick your brain on a little bit. One is the thought process on the change from the seat-based to the 20% that you mentioned. I know we briefly talked about it, but at a high level, what were your thoughts on pivoting and going that direction, which is my second question as well. As entrepreneurs, business owners, founders in this space, sometimes we do pivot, but what were some of the high level thoughts that you had on making this change?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a great question. It's been a fun process to sort of figure out the best way to do this. Era is already, I think it's the easiest app on the App Exchange to install. It takes less than an hour to get it set up. It runs 100% in the background, which means there's no user training and there's no change management. And so the only barrier to entry left for customers was the price tag and saying, hey, I need to pay for this without having certainty that I'm going to be able to realize value from it on the back end. And so it was kind of a no-brainer on our end to say, okay, well, how can we remove that last barrier and make it absolutely a no-brainer to that everyone that has Salesforce should be installing Era, and kind of came up with this concept of kind of success-based pricing where we're only charging a fee if the customer realizes value. And so I'm just making it an absolute no-brainer for hopefully everyone and removing every single barrier that we can to kind of getting Era out there and creating value for our customers.
And I would say not only if, but when. I would say especially the more enterprise organizations, the mid-size, right? I don't even think it's a if, it's like a when, right? There's no question that there's got to be users that are not needing the licenses that they have. And I think, again, back to your if, when, I think this is a powerful app and tool, innovative. And if on the second question I had, because I think you're a founder at heart, an entrepreneur, the pivoting that you talked about, it's great for a lot of our listeners are founders, partners, consultancies, and the value of realizing when to pivot and seeing opportunities and know when to change. I know we didn't talk about this before, but can you talk through even just from a founder mindset, from someone who builds an app, and the pivoting and the seeing opportunities and changing when you know it's the right direction? Do you have thoughts or any feedback or insights you can give to others that are listening on kind of how you think about these things? Do you pivot fast? Do you think through things for 6 months? Kind of how do you operate in that side of things?
Yeah. Cool. That's an awesome question. I'm gonna give myself a second by responding to kind of one of the first parts of what you said, which is not if, it's when, and that's the other totally critical piece behind getting comfortable with this decision of charging for only for in the event we make, we realize value that we're successful for our customers. And yeah, there's so much overspending on licenses in all software that it's a surefire, it's a guaranteed success for us as a company. We're not going to find savings in every single customer org that we're installed in, but there's enough of it out there that we have 100% certainty that this is going to work out for Era as well. And so it's totally important point that I failed to mention before. And the second part of it, I think like that's a really tough question. So just decision making and pivoting and knowing when to pivot. I don't know if I have any advice or like good guidelines to operate under there, but I'll tell you, when you were talking, what I was thinking about is my own personal hatred for arbitrary rules. If there's a rule and we're doing something like, and there's no good reason for it, and happens in a lot of organizations and a lot of places, I just like, my blood boils.
I agree.
Yeah. And so I don't know if it's, I don't really know if there's advice but maybe just kind of like fun, interesting introspection is like, I think the willingness to do it for me just comes from the fact that I'm like, hey, if this doesn't make sense, let's stop doing it and go do something that does make sense. And this pricing change was 100% that.
That makes sense. I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way, right? And then that freedom that comes with it, there's responsibility and stress, but also the freedom. It's like this three-way kind of thing. Thanks for the update on the pricing model. We'll go on with the rest of the episode. Makes sense. So that's what I was wondering, because I'm assuming on the bigger implementations or Salesforce instances, there is going to be some component of advisory or consulting from Era as well to help map all this and get it figured out, or is it they can do it all on their own, like a Salesforce consultant or somebody?
Our plan is to stay focused on the product. And our goal is to make the product as comprehensive as possible so that we don't need to play a large role. I think there's a role for partnering with other SIs out there to play that role, to become experts in Era and to help customers actually execute on that strategy, as well as in-house Salesforce folks who are going to be actually logging in and making these changes, creating new profiles and things like that. But for Era, we're really focused on building the product.
Yeah, because it's a value add for a SI, right? It's like, hey, we also do this, because everyone says they do a license audit, right? We've all done that, like you mentioned, right? It's like the last time they logged in was 2 years ago. We can get rid of them. This is so much more different that it seems like and I know we've talked about it before, just a huge value add that SIs can pull in as part of their managed services or engagements, et cetera, to bring to existing clients as well.
100%. Yeah, I think it can be an awesome value add for SIs, and because it's the SIs are the experts in the room who can hold the customer's hand and say, here's what this means, and here's how do we actually here's and execute with them. But then the audit that an SI can do for their customer with Era is just, it's not even in the same ballpark as what we can do kind of manually, what we've done in the past manually. We can look at hundreds of add-ons assigned to thousands or tens of thousands of users and say, hey, this list of users are not eligible to be changed from this, from Salesforce to platform or whatever the case may be, because they have X, Y, and Z add-ons, and those add-ons are not compatible. Or this list of users over here has system permissions that they won't continue to be able to have access to or continually use if they're on a platform license. And we've done the legwork to look in what I've started to call the darkest corners of the Salesforce metadata to I find these kind of little puzzle pieces and put it together.
So whenever I hear the word audit, first thing that comes to my mind is compliance, because audit and compliance go hand in hand. So talk us a little bit about like, how do you approach compliance?
Tell me, what do you have in mind? I'm not sure if I.
So when I say compliance, it's basically like, I could be using some lame terms here, like, SOX compliant. Like, how is the compliance part baked into your product in terms of like compliance certifications or adhering to compliance standards?
So I guess, the main point to make there is just that it's a 100% native product to Salesforce with no connected apps. And so all the data is stored in your org and protected by the same infrastructure as everything else. It's been through security review by Salesforce and approved to make sure that there isn't anything negligent or malicious in it, and that it doesn't compromise the security protocols that Salesforce is providing you on all of the rest of your data. So to the extent that any part of your org is compliant with whatever your customers are subject to, the Era data and the Era tools are as well. Does that answer your question? Is that what you had in mind? Or?
Yeah.
It does. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and,
Yeah.
and just to kind of shift gears a little bit, we always end with a few of the like 3 or 4 common questions. But I know you have the SI side, you have the app side. Is there advice you would give anyone looking to launch or start an app, build an app? Like one piece of advice you'd give them if they were thinking to go in that direction that you've learned along the way, or that you've seen that is just something that they can take when they build an app or launch an app? Some things to think about, like one main piece of advice that you've learned?
Gosh, we're such like we're so early days with the app that I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice on that yet. The one thing I'm thinking about that I think is everybody has to be paying attention to in our space is Agent Force and AI. I think say what you will about how it's been rolled out. It's happening and it's going to be an absolute game changer. And so for us in our shoes as partners, it's I think I get frustrated with how much Monday morning quarterbacking there is and criticism of kind of the rollout process. I don't. It is what it is. That's done, and it's buggy and a little tricky to actually realize value from. But it's only a matter of time before that's fleshed out and it's working. And so like I don't know. The thing that I'm thinking about a lot is just how do I make sure that I'm a part of that we're totally educated on how to use those tools, and so that whether it's as an SI for our customers or inside of our product, we're not being left behind by that, and that we're the ones kind of introducing new concepts there and helping people access it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Agent forces, AI is everywhere, in and outside of the Salesforce platform itself. There's just AI everywhere. Development tools, configuration tools, inside agents, etc. So yeah, it's definitely not going anywhere. And did you have something, Avinash, before I end with our last one that we always do?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, like, just in the spirit of like, what's next? Like, what's next for Guy?
What's next for me? The like. I think you guys kind of get it. And John, in some of our conversations previously, you've been just such a great hype man. You're like, oh my God, yes, there's value here. And I think the thing that I um keep thinking is that like it's almost too it's so obvious to me the value that Era creates for any Salesforce enterprise customer. Like in my mind, there's no reason that a Salesforce enterprise customer shouldn't have Era installed and be using this. And so what's next for me is trying to get every Salesforce enterprise customer on
And winning your race this weekend.
winning my race this weekend, and yeah, spending time with my family and all those good things.
I love it. And thanks for joining from the boat today. This has been fun. It's different. It's refreshing. You're definitely a cool guy, to say the least. So, and we really appreciated having you on today, Guy. So it's Lanvale and then also eracloud.co. Is that the place where they find out about Era?
Yeah,
Eracloud.co.
check us out on the App Exchange,
Awesome.
install a trial if you like, but also the website, and then don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to talk about how we can help.
Excited to see the impact of Era. We loved having you on today and enjoy having you in the mastermind as well. And appreciate you being on the episode today, Guy.
Awesome, yeah. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This has been fun.